Robot versus Predator. It sounds like the title of a movie, but the Burmese python infestation in Florida is far from a work of fiction.
Duel is being unleashed in Florida's Everglades to hunt Burmese pythons. All right, take a look at this right here. Scientists have deployed 120 robot rabbits.
The Florida Everglades is becoming a silent graveyard. An invisible predator has taken over, wiping out nearly 99% of the native mammals and turning this wilderness into its own kingdom. For years, humans tried everything to stop the Burmese python, from bounty hunters to detection dogs, but nothing worked. In a final act of desperation, officials did something that sounded insane. They released hundreds of mechanical rabbits into the high grass. At first, the public mocked the idea of robotic prey, but the laughter stopped when the data came in. These machines were built to do what no human could ever achieve. This is the true story of how Florida is finally outsmarting nature. Traps with a heartbeat. At sunrise, the Florida Everglades looks like a beautiful, living mirror. The sawgrass shimmers over the slow-moving water, and everything seems peaceful. But beneath that beauty, a war is happening. For 40 years, a silent invader has been taking over. The Burmese python has turned this wilderness into its own kingdom. These snakes are massive, with some reaching over 20 feet long. They have no natural enemies here, and they eat almost anything that moves. To start things off, humans tried everything to stop them. They sent in thousands of hunters, and even used high-tech drones. Nothing worked. The snakes just kept growing in number. Then came the plan that made everyone laugh. Florida officials announced they were releasing hundreds of robotic rabbits into the swamps.
They may look out of place to us humans, but these stuffed robotic rabbits are supposed to attract predators, specifically the Burmese python.
These weren't just plastic statues. They were high-tech machines with fake fur, solar panels, and heaters inside. The public thought it was a joke. People on the internet mocked the idea, saying that Florida had finally lost its mind. But if you look a little closer, you find the real story. These robots were designed to think and feel like real prey. They moved their ears, they smelled like mammals, and they stayed warm just like a living creature. The goal was to lure the pythons out of hiding. These snakes are masters of camouflage. They can hide in a few inches of water and stay invisible for weeks. But they have one weakness. They're very hungry, and they love marsh rabbits. Because the pythons have already eliminated almost all the real rabbits, they can't resist a new one. When the machines stepped into the fight, the mockery turned into silence. The first few days of the project were quiet, but then the sensors started to go off. Believe it or not, it gets even weirder. The cameras inside the robots began to capture images that scientists had never seen before. Large snakes weren't just biting the robots, they were trying to communicate with them or study them. The data collected in those first 48 hours was more valuable than 10 years of traditional hunting. It changed everything, no question about it. People who once laughed were now leaning in to see the footage. The results were proving that technology could do what muscle and grit could not. But while everyone was looking at the success, something else was moving in the deep water. But wait, there's a major issue the scientists didn't plan for. An unstoppable force. To understand why Florida needed robots, you have to look at how the problem started. This disaster wasn't a natural event. It was a human mistake. Back in the 1980s and 1990s, Burmese pythons were popular pets. They were small, cute, and easy to keep in a glass tank. But these snakes don't stay small for long. They grow several feet every year. Soon, owners had 20-foot monsters in their living rooms that they could no longer feed or handle. Many of these owners made a terrible choice. They drove to the edge of the Everglades and let the snakes go. Then came Hurricane Andrew in 1992. That storm was a Category 5 monster that destroyed a large reptile breeding facility. Hundreds, maybe thousands of pythons escaped into the wild all at once. The Florida heat and the wet swamps were perfect for them. It was exactly like their home in Southeast Asia. With no tigers or large predators to stop them, the snakes began to multiply. A single female python can lay up to 100 eggs every single year. Plain and simple, the population exploded. The effect on the native animals was devastating. In the areas where the snakes live, the number of raccoons and opossums has dropped by more than 99%. The marsh rabbits, which used to be everywhere, were basically wiped out. Even the mighty alligators began to lose fights to these snakes. There are videos of pythons and alligators locked in battles that last for hours. Sometimes the snake even tries to swallow the alligator whole. It turned the Everglades into a silent battlefield where the native species had no chance.
And the Burmese python is eating its way to top predator. Nothing is safe from this python's killer appetite.
Many people ignore the loss of small animals, but this loss destroys the entire ecosystem. When rabbits and raccoons disappear, predators like hawks lose their food source. Even the soil suffers because there are no scavengers left to clean the land. This chain reaction is slowly breaking the Everglades apart. To stop this, Florida launched the Python Challenge. Officials offered thousands of dollars in prizes to whoever could catch the most pythons. Thousands of hunters arrived with bags and hooks, but the results were disappointing. In the first year, 1,600 hunters caught only 68 snakes. This low number proves just how difficult these snakes are to find. Humans are simply too loud and too slow to catch a predator that has been evolving for millions of years. This frustration led the state to spend millions on new ideas. They needed a way to make the snakes come to them. They needed a secret weapon that did not need to sleep or eat. That is when the idea for the monsters was born, but it wasn't what anyone expected. The live bait scandal. When the bounty hunts failed to fix the problem, Florida switched gears for a second. They decided to use man's best friend. In 2020, they introduced a team of detection dogs. These weren't ordinary pets. They were elite workers like Truman and Eleanor. One was a Labrador and the other was a pointing dog. They were trained for months to smell the specific musk of a Burmese python. Humans can't smell a snake, but these dogs could find one hidden under 6 feet of dead leaves. For a while, it seemed like the dogs were the answer. They were finding snakes much faster than any human hunter ever could. But the Everglades is a very mean place for a dog. The heat is intense, the grass is sharp as a razor, and there are poisonous snakes and hungry alligators everywhere. The dogs had to wear special boots and cooling vests just to survive a few hours of work. Plus, you can't have thousands of dogs roaming the swamp. It was too expensive and too dangerous for the animals. This led to a very controversial idea. Scientists thought, if the snakes love rabbits, why don't we use real rabbits to lure them in? They put live rabbits in protected cages to see if the snakes would come. It worked almost too well. The snakes showed up in huge numbers, but the public was very upset. People thought it was cruel to use live animals as bait, even if the rabbits were safe inside a cage. The project was shut down quickly because of the outcry. This is where the real innovation happened. If live rabbits worked but weren't allowed, the only answer was to build a better rabbit. Engineers teamed up with biologists to create a machine that could mimic life.
These decoy bunnies are solar-powered, remote-controlled, and complete with cameras, heat signatures, and actual marsh rabbit scent.
These robotic rabbits were the rare snake hunters the titles talked about. They did not eliminate the snakes with teeth or claws. They eliminated them by being the perfect trap. They were designed to be released by the hundreds and left alone in the wild. Most folks have no idea how complex these machines really are. They have internal heaters that keep their body temperature at exactly 101 degrees. They release a scent that smells like a stressed rabbit, which pythons find irresistible. They even have tiny motors that make the fur twitch every few minutes. When the first batch was released, the experts were nervous. They had spent a lot of money on what looked like stuffed toys. But as the sun went down on the first night, the cameras began to flicker to life. The python's new nightmare. The first night of the robotic rabbit release was tense. Scientists sat in a dark room miles away, watching digital screens. For hours, there was nothing but the sound of wind in the grass. Then, a heat sensor on robot number 42 spiked. A massive shape was moving through the water. It was a Burmese python, at least 15 feet long. It did not just swim past. It stopped. It flicked its tongue. It was sensing the heat and the smell of the machine. In a sudden move, the snake struck. It wrapped its heavy body around the robotic rabbit and squeezed with incredible force. This is the part that makes absolutely no sense to most people. The robot did not break. It was built to withstand thousands of pounds of pressure. Instead, it sent a signal to a nearby team of human handlers. Because the snake was busy trying to eliminate the rabbit, it did not notice the humans approaching. They were able to capture the snake easily. This happened over and over again. But the real result that changed everyone's minds was the data. The robots weren't just traps, they were spies. They recorded how the snakes moved and how they hunted. Scientists discovered that the snakes were much smarter than they previously thought. The pythons were using specific paths through the swamp that humans had never checked. They also found that the snakes were gathering in certain areas to lay eggs. By using the robots to find these nesting spots, Florida was able to remove thousands of unhatched eggs at once. Removing one adult snake is good, but removing 100 future snakes is a game changer. This was the wow information that the critics did not have. The mockery stopped because the numbers were undeniable. The state was finally removing more snakes than were being born. To put it in simple words, the machines were winning the war of numbers. If you take away all the noise, it's about this. The robots allowed humans to see into a world that had been hidden for 40 years. They found out that the pythons were moving much further north than anyone expected. They also learned that the snakes were beginning to adapt to the salt water in the ocean. This was a scary discovery. It meant the snakes could eventually leave the Everglades and move into the Florida Keys or even up the coast to other states. The project proved that we can't just hunt our way out of this problem. We have to outsmart it. The robotic rabbits are now being upgraded with artificial intelligence. Soon, they'll be able to recognize a snake and send a drone to pick it up automatically. It sounds like science fiction, but it's the only way to save the native animals. But there's still one mystery that the robots haven't been able to solve yet. Evolution versus engineering. As we look at the facts, the robotic rabbit program is just the beginning. Florida is now looking at other mechanical helpers. They're testing robotic fish to find invasive lionfish in the ocean, and mechanical birds to watch the forest. The success of the snake hunters has opened a new door for conservation. It showed that we can use technology to fix the mistakes we made in the past, but it's not a perfect fix. The part that nobody talks about is the cost. Each robotic rabbit is very expensive. To cover the entire Everglades, which is over 1.5 million acres, would cost more money than the state has. There's also the worry that the snakes will eventually learn. Animals are very good at adapting. If a snake strikes a robot and gets captured, the ones that watch might learn to stay away from anything that smells like that specific machine. It's a constant race between human engineering and natural evolution. Let's look at what's actually happening right now. The native animals are slowly starting to come back in small areas. In the places where the robots and hunters are most active, people are seeing marsh rabbits and raccoons for the first time in years. It's a small victory, but it's a start. The Everglades is a treasure that belongs to everyone, and seeing it come back to life is worth every penny spent on high-tech toys. The Everglades has become a battlefield between ancient evolution and human engineering. These robotic rabbits are the last line of defense, but they raise a difficult question. Are we playing God by filling the swamp with AI and machinery, or are we simply cleaning up our own mess? I want your verdict. Is this the future of conservation, or a dangerous mistake? Let me know below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Florida's weird and wild underbelly, subscribe to The Unsealed Prophecy for more.